Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining this Criterion Edge webinar. For those of you that are not already aware, Criterion Edge is dedicated to helping IVD medical device and pharmaceutical companies advance compliance and enhance market success through industry-leading regulatory, scientific, and clinical writing services. Our webinar today is entitled Overcoming Deadline Bottlenecks in Pharma, How a Writing Team Can Help, presented by Sheila Grab and Lori Mitchell. Next slide. Lori Mitchell, founder and president of Criterion Edge, excels in addressing regulatory and writing challenges in the pharmaceutical, IVD, and medical device sectors. With decades of clinical and regulatory experience, coupled with a practical, solutions-driven mindset, she has positioned Criterion Edge as a leading provider of regulatory and scientific writing services. Holding a Master of Nursing from UCLA, Lori brings a unique blend of clinical insight and regulatory knowledge that drives Criterion Edge's commitment to quality and client success in complex clinical and regulatory landscapes. Dr. Sheila Grab is a Principal Writer 3 at Criterion Edge, where she specializes in navigating complex regulatory environments for pharmaceutical companies. With a robust educational background, including a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Pittsburgh, Sheila brings over a decade of experience in clinical research and scientific writing. Her expertise spans preclinical, clinical, and translational research across multiple therapeutic areas and has experience in developing clinical trial strategies and regulatory documentation. Sheila's deep understanding of regulatory process and commitment to excellence make her an invaluable resource to clients striving for success in the pharmaceutical landscape. Now to get into the presentation. In the fast-paced environment of pharmaceutical development, competing project demands often outstrip available team resources, which can result in critical bottlenecks affecting on-time completion of written deliverables. Teams frequently find themselves finishing one clinical study and needing to pivot to the next project development, leaving tasks like CSR completion sidelined. Additionally, competing priorities, from regulatory requirements to study design revisions, can push essential writing deliverables to the back burner. By leveraging the skills and expertise of an experienced writing team, companies can ensure the timely completion of documents and maintain project momentum without compromising quality. I'll now hand it off to Sheila to kick it off with today's presentation.
All right, thanks, Justin. So just kind of outlining what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at the learning objectives where we're going to explore common bottlenecks in pharmaceutical documentation workflows and their impact. We're going to understand the value of a dedicated writing team to alleviate source constraints and improve efficiency. We're also going to discuss some strategies for integrating a dedicated writing team into projects to ensure the timely completion of critical documents like clinical study reports, investigator brochures, and protocols. So I'm going to start off today, and then later in the presentation, I'll hand it over to Laurie. But what I get to talk about is kind of the fun part. Well, not really the fun part, because we've all experienced these bottlenecks, but more just, highlighting the experiences that most of us have had with, timeline delays or, real problem points. I doubt that I'm going to be providing any, groundbreaking or new information to you, because most of your teams have experienced things like this. You're aware of them. What we're trying to do is provide a comprehensive overview of where all of these issues can arise. And I think then, what Laurie will touch on is, when these, issues pop up, how a writing team can really help alleviate them. So to organize, the thoughts, we don't want to just throw all the problems at you. We wanted to organize these kind of bottlenecks into three main areas or buckets. And so what I'll do is I'll discuss some of the process-related bottlenecks, some document-specific bottlenecks, and then the ones that, you can't really plan for. So the unexpected, the unknowns, the ones that usually tend to really catch you off guard, surprise you, and, have that, potential negative impact. So starting off with some of our process-related bottlenecks, we're going to look at that initial regulatory strategy. So we know that developing a clear and appropriate comprehensive regulatory strategy is crucial. Delays can occur if this roadmap is not well defined or if there's gaps in the strategy. So even when you have a really well-defined strategy, you will need to ensure that all the key stakeholders are defined and on board. You don't want to get months down the road and realize, some of the department heads aren't in agreement with this regulatory strategy. Regarding the data that will be needed to support this strategy, is the team confident that they have defined the correct data sets and that this data can really support the identified regulatory strategy? The data said, okay, this is what we're going to need. Can it be generated? And are the timelines for developing this data, are they realistic? Another, kind of potential area where there could be some issues about is, does the team fully understand the regulatory requirements for this strategy? Are they clear? And issues with any of these key points can severely impact not only, the entire regulatory process and approval, but timelines, company strategy, and product development. So another key area is related to team dynamics. So are roles and responsibilities properly defined? So I think we've all experienced, when you're not exactly sure what part you're working on a project or who to go to answer questions or make key decisions. So we know that a lack of clear roles and responsibilities, especially when team members are unsure of their specific roles, can lead to tasks being duplicated, neglected, completely forgot about, and this can cause delays and confusion. So even if team members are, have very strictly defined roles and responsibilities, if they don't have the correct expertise, and sometimes even more importantly, bandwidth, it's going to be an uphill battle to complete a project. Competition for limited resources can also create this bottleneck. So this is often seen in high demand periods or when there's multiple projects running concurrently. So are key decision makers known, and are they able to take on this responsibility? So again, that question of bandwidth is very important. But also slow or indecisive decision makers can really stall products, especially if there's multiple stakeholders involved and consensus is difficult to achieve. So another process-related bottleneck is, related to SOPs and templates. So have document-specific processes been developed? If they aren't developed, well, that's a hole. And you might need to rely on a third-party vendor. You might be using their SOPs. So you'll need to ensure that there's adequate training and understanding. And if you're using internal SOPs, are they detailed or overly lengthy? Are they difficult to follow? Because this can lead to errors or non-compliance. Are they implemented properly? So variations in how SOPs are implemented across different departments or location can cause confusion and inefficiencies. And so that also really comes into play if you are using a third-party vendor, if you're going to rely on their SOPs, you want to make sure that there's a streamlined approach and that there's not any confusion or inefficiencies when using these documents. So are employees trained and experienced in using these established procedures? So insufficient training on SOPs or even insufficient experience, employees might not understand or follow the procedures correctly. And again, this can lead to issues further down the road, non-compliance. Also, are SOPs current, sufficient, reflective of practice and regulatory requirements? SOPs that are not regulated can become outdated, leading to inconsistencies and potential regulatory issues. The process-related bottlenecks related to scoping and workflow. So this, I think, is one that we're all very experienced with, and this is kind of a catch-all. because I think, so many of these different points can, kind of fall under the umbrella of scoping and workflow. So have reviewers and review timelines, internal and external, been established? So without structured deadlines, we know timeline slippage can occur. I've worked on projects where, everyone's completed their review, and then two more reviewers come in, and they might have differing opinions on some of the decisions that were already made. So it's important to upfront have a clear definition of who's going to review, who has the ultimate, kind of say so, and, have timelines for these reviews been established. How many and who are the key stakeholders? I think that kind of leads into what I was just saying before, that, you oftentimes have multiple, in a sense, cooks in the kitchen. So you need to understand who's making final decisions and are they willing to take on this responsibility? So misalignment among stakeholders on project goals and deliverables can cause delays and rework. Will the workflow involve complex approvals, multiple decision makers, or cross-functional coordination? So delays in obtaining approvals or feedback can impact project timelines. And where is the data coming from? So data from various sources. Who's analyzing this data? Who's ensuring that it's complete? If it's coming from multiple departments, is someone overseeing all of that data? And how are you ensuring that it is complete, especially if it's coming from multiple teams or multiple departments? Timelines and deadlines. So again, I think, there's some repetition with these because it's all so intertwined. I think I've talked about, all of these things that can impact deadlines, but, it's very important to establish realistic deadlines, plan for potential issues that can arise, such as competing projects and resource allocation. And I think, developing a realistic timeline with some flexibility. Everyone is always going to want it to be done as fast as possible to save on resources and, hit, these, established timelines. But if they're just hypothetical timelines that you're never hitting, what's the use of that if everyone is always going over them? So I think it's important to, be realistic, meet with teams, ensure, based on bandwidth, expertise, and competing projects, we have set realistic timelines. And also knowing that, reevaluating these timelines is also very important. If you had timeline slippage, why was that? Can you look back and say, okay, here were the issues that impacted that the most and how we account for that in the future? So kind of going on to our second big category, we're going to look at some document-specific bottlenecks. So we hit on the process ones, but now we're going to kind of look at the document-specific ones. So a big one here that can cause issues with your documentation is misalignment with regulatory requirements. So in highly regulated field, you're writing documents that have very specific requirements, and if these documents don't meet these requirements, regulatory submissions may be outright rejected. A complete resubmission may be necessary, and this can really impact project timelines. Source document readiness and or data inaccuracies. So missing or incomplete information can disrupt the continuity and affect the credibility and overall completeness of the document. Another project that I worked on recently, there was actually an error in some of the upfront programming. So when looking at some of the documents that were coming from the clinical study, the data was actually incorrect. And so when using that data as a source document to write another document, you're incorporating incorrect data. So once we found out some of those issues, we had to go back and redo the work. And so in a sense, we were doing some double work because of minor inaccuracies. Messaging inconsistencies, including continuity and conclusions. Inconsistent flow and structure can make the document very hard to follow, leading to confusion and misrepresentation of the data. You need to make sure your messaging is clear. And I think, that kind of relates, has that initial regulatory strategy been identified? Is everyone on board? And is that messaging continuing through all of the documentation? And, making sure that it's not changing and there's not confusion. So disconnected presentation of data can obscure key findings and insight, and it can make it very difficult for reviewers to draw conclusions. And we all know we want to make things as easy as possible on reviewers, whether that's an internal review team or a regulatory review team. Doc control and management, versioning, formatting, QC. I've seen so many issues with that where someone, I edited the wrong version. Now I have to merge with this one, and then big changes or in the document don't get incorporated. So poorly controlled documents result in these inconsistencies in variability in quality and performance. And repeated revisions and corrections due to poor doc control increase workload, and leads to more time and for regulatory and quality. And it really takes time away from other critical tasks that have been used to budget that time. Okay, the third bucket is, kind of that one I said, the unexpected, the ones that you can't really plan for. You might build some flexibility into timelines, but it's hard to say, I know that, we're going to go through this many rounds of regulatory feedback and it's going to take this long. You don't really know that. So you can, do your best to prepare, for hypotheticals, but, there can be multiple review cycles with regulatory bodies that you did not anticipate. Requests for additional data can really impact timelines. The regulatory body might say you need another animal study before you can go on, or you need to collect more data. That's not a quick fix. That is planning, implementation, and executing a potential other study to get that additional data. So these are the things you can't really plan for. You can think about and maybe start working on strategy in the back if you think that this is likely going to happen, but it's hard to have a concrete timeline for these. And so this is, I think, one of the places that a little flexibility can be built into timeline, but it's really, really hard to account for what that will actually look like. Another unexpected is competing high priority tasks. We've all had, kind of the high priority task pop up and it has to be done yesterday. That can disrupt ongoing projects and lead to delays. So teams might sometimes need to pause or slow down current work to address any of the urgent tasks or very strict predefined regulatory deadlines. There's also research allocation conflicts. So when you have multiple high priority tasks that require the same resources, personnel, equipment, it can create conflicts and delays. And so managing these resources effectively becomes critical in order to avoid bottlenecks. Also, delays with external stakeholders. Again, you don't really know when these are going to hit. So if you're using third-party vendors, this is outside of your control. So you can have supplier or manufacturer issues, which can lead to study delay or product manufacturing delays. If you're using a CRO, if a CRO is delayed, really this can impact all aspects of a study, from study startup to study closeout. Any external laboratory delays can really impact your timelines. If you're maybe using an external laboratory for an animal study, if they're backlogged, your team is going to feel that and sometimes even more. Oh, sorry. So I think, I got to highlight the pain points. I got to highlight, kind of these big areas where we see impacts to project timelines based on these bottlenecks. Not a comprehensive list. I tried to give as, as broad as a range as possible, And I'm sure that everyone on the call probably has, some other specifics or even, kind of some horror stories that, they say, oh, this happened and it really impacted my timelines. But I got to introduce kind of the problems, and now I'm going to hand it over to Lori, who's going to talk to you more about what are some of the solutions. And I think what she's going to talk about is, how an external writing team can be integrated and help to overcome some of, the issues that we know can happen.
Thank
So,
you,
Lori?
Sheila. Yeah, thank you. And by the way, folks on the call, Sheila's got control of the slides, so you'll hear me saying next slide. Sorry about that. Sheila, you have talked a great deal about a lot of the very common issues that all of us have experienced in various projects, the pain points, as you say, that are painful and cause our problem-solving skills to really stretch to the max to get through some of these pain points. You've talked about process-related issues, stakeholder-related issues, upfront, the importance of upfront planning, the data integrity, document integrity, and the aspect that we talk a lot about when Criterion Edge puts on our webinars, we talk about the importance of time. So let's get started with the one team does it all approach. And before, Sheila, you start advancing the slides, I want to say one other thing. We're not going to talk just about the integration of external teams. We're going to start there. But if you have an internal team of writers, many of the same concepts would apply to them. So Sheila, start this slide by clicking on, and we're going to kind of start looking at the team. So the scenario is a small but up and coming biotech company is driving their big breakthrough drug to market, and it's all hands on deck. So here are the key players on their team. Quality, of course, is always going to be on a project-related team. They are critical players on every team as this project is coming to fruition and documents are going to begin to be written. Regulatory, of course, our friends in regulatory are our partners every step of the way, and they can be depended upon to never take their eyes off of anything. Clinical, they are at the heart of it all because many of these reports are more clinically focused than they are regulatory focused. So those two groups together form a critical piece of the overall puzzle. Non-clinical are certainly contributors, the CMC writing, the other types of non-clinical data that feed into a project. They have to be ready to go to provide their information when the time comes. Project managers, what would we do without them? They keep us humming along. They keep their eye on timelines. They are certainly watching out for these bottlenecks and are working really hard to either avoid them or to solve them once they come up. And the other key stakeholders are KOLs and other parts of the team that step in and out to guide us along the way, either external stakeholders or internal stakeholders. So this team is scrambling. The submission deadline is 4 months away, and the pivotal CSR still needs to be written. So we'll pause there and say, who is missing in this matrix? That's right. Who's going to write this? So I've got a regulatory friend who says, everything that I talk about, or, this is a guy, he says that I talk about has to be written down. And that's one way of thinking about, all of these projects is whatever it is you're doing, it has to be written down. It goes in a report to somebody for some reason. And the writers are the often overlooked member of this team. So next slide, Sheila. So we're going to go over for a few minutes the benefits of a dedicated writer or a dedicated writing team. This is agnostic to whether this writing team is external to your company or internal to your company. Doesn't matter. The important word in this title is a dedicated writer. So a writer who understands how to write. And what I mean by that is that somebody on the project team hasn't been recruited to get all this written down on paper and get the report prepared. But this is a dedicated writer whose job it is to prepare the document and get it ready for submission. So there are key aspects to a dedicated writer: their familiarity with writing, their experience with it, and their ability to focus on the written document. Next slide. So let's talk about familiarity first. So a seasoned writer, they're experts at the document. They're experts on the document and what it takes to put a document together. They're familiar with the demands and nuances of many common documents, reports, and templates. If they are experienced, they have written many types of reports using many types of templates under many types of circumstances. And they are at their heart the problem solvers of your team. There's problem solving all the way through your team, but when it has to go on paper and that story must be told coherently, an experienced writer, whoever that is, external or internal, are the folks that you want doing that job. They are expert users of Word, Excel, EndNote, all of those. They have their eye on the messaging. They work very hard at maintaining consistent messaging statements throughout the documents and even across documents. Who do you know on your team that can manage the styles, the templates, the tables, the figures, and fix bugs in documents like an experienced writer? That's literally what they do all day, every day. And those issues right there, styles, tables, figures, fixing bugs, all of that can really slow down a project if someone who is not experienced is called upon to do that. Next slide. So familiarity was the first. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about experience. An experienced writer understands the purpose and the intent of the document and the story that document needs to tell. Every document tells a story, and the way I say things is you start at the beginning, go to the middle, get to the end, and you stop, and that's the story from beginning to end, and stay consistent throughout. So experienced writers, they understand the content requirements, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the document that they're tasked with writing. If they are experienced in that document, they know where the hidden traps are and how to either avoid them or handle them when they come up. Because documents do have traps. You're writing something over in section 4.2 and it shows up in 4 different places. Don't fall into the trap of not checking in all those places that you've used the same wording, for example. Experienced writers understand and are familiar with the regulations governing the report itself. They are not usually regulatory affairs professionals per se, and they don't fill that role on a team, a project team, but they understand what the regulations are requiring in the document itself, and they align the document to those requirements. Experienced writers are able to present information effectively, convey the appropriate messaging, and ensure the readability of the document. What I have said in past webinars is whoever the regulatory reviewers are, the external regulatory reviewers are, think of them as overworked, tired, possibly cranky, and they just want to get through this, not fast, but they just hope that the document's going to be easy to follow, easy to read, understandable. And if it's not, and they have to work hard to try to get the information out of it that they need to understand, their crankiness level will go up, and they'll start mistrusting the report or the document because they can't follow it logically. And when you've lost your regulatory reviewer because they're confused, that's not a place that any project team wants to be in. So where the traps are, the writer is familiar with the regulations, as I said, and again, to finish this off, able to present the information effectively, convey that appropriate messaging consistently, and ensure the readability of the document. Next slide. So focus. This is an important concept. I think that these first two concepts, familiarity and even experience, folks on a project team, the quality, the clinical folks, all of those people, regulatory, they may think and believe that one of them or a member of their team would certainly be adequate to the task to write the document. And they may be right. There may be people on the team that have other jobs to do that could absolutely write the document from beginning to end. But what did I just say? They have other jobs to do. Those members of the team are assigned other responsibilities. So this focus part, a concept, is important. A dedicated writer is empowered to be focused on one key task, assembling and writing the document in concert with the other members of the project team. They should not be distracted by multiple competing priorities. They should keep their focus on the preparation of the document and what it's going to take from the rest of the members of the project team in order to accomplish that. They don't, if they're a dedicated writer, we kind of talked just now about that switching problem. Someone who's in regulatory, for example, and they're also tasked with writing the report, they have to switch between their roles. And if you're familiar with that switching issue, it's fraught with peril in that yesterday I was doing this, today I need to do this, or this afternoon I need to do this. Where was I? What was I thinking about? Where did I leave off? How do I go from here? It's that switching, and it's inefficient at best, and introduces issues and errors at worst. And then again, a focused writer can provide valuable timeline management skills to ensure the on-time completion of the document. They can help those project managers keep their eye on the ball, because if the writer knows how long it's going to take them to complete a section or what they're going to need in order to do that, and if they work with the project manager because there's a delay in an input document that writer's going to need, and that input is delayed for 3 days, that threatens the timeline, or the writer may say, I've got it, at that 3-day delay, I'm still good. We don't need to change our timelines. Writers who are dedicated on getting the job done on the project and in the document know their timelines very, very well. Next slide. So I'm talking about not just an internal writing team or an external writing team. I'm just talking here today about a writing partner, whether that's a partner within your own team or company, or a dedicated writing team within your own company, or you're considering bringing in external writing help. all the concepts that I've just talked about apply to any of those scenarios. A writer, whether they're internal and dedicated or an external partner, should meet all of those criteria that we've just talked about. So these essential characteristics of experience and this partnership and expertise is really very important to integrate the writer into the overall project. Next slide. So here we're back to that team and the team integration. So we're getting ready to sort of finish up this part of the presentation, but again, the writer is at the center, and that's on purpose, because the writing team or the writer gets input, feedback from all members around that circle. So they are taking in information directly rather than it being filtered through, Sally, Mary, and John until it gets to the writer, and then it sometimes becomes a bit of a game of telephone. Who said what and who's supposed to do what? So this team integration of putting a writer, a dedicated writer, whether that's external or internal, to help with your project is really, they're at the center. They can help with project planning. They will participate in the scoping discussions, kickoff meetings, that often overlooked part of getting a writing project off the ground. Sometimes internal teams, there is no formal ready, set, go, blow the whistle, we're starting, let's have a scoping meeting. It just sort of begins. And that those scoping meetings, bringing those and those kickoff meetings and bringing those key stakeholders together are just critical to a great start on a project. The writers can help to ensure that there are ongoing key meetings, that they know who their key contacts are. They are working very closely with project management, and they are helping to manage, as we just discussed, those key project milestones. Next slide. So again, I just alluded to this, internal versus external writing support, pros and cons. Assessment of your internal writing capabilities. You should apply, as I just noted, you should apply the same assessment to your internal staff. These same assessment tests to evaluate the experience, readiness, and availability of your internal writing resources. Are they familiar with the project, with the document? The document, these are writers now, so they have to be somewhat familiar with the project, but they really have to be and understand and be familiar with the document that they are being tasked to write, because they understand the requirements of the document. So that familiarity. Have they done this type of writing before? Are they familiar? Do they have that experience? And do they have the focus to drive this document or deliverable to completion? So these are the questions you ask yourself. Will they need additional support, other team members, or external writing support? So that begins your process of like, do we have someone on staff who can do this writing? Do they meet these qualifications and criteria? Or will this project team need additional writing support, either external or another dedicated team member? So those are the questions you should be asking yourself when evaluating internal versus external writing support. So let's go on now to a short case study. We're almost done. And kind of think about another case study. So a small but established biotech company has completed their large pivotal trial for a new biologic. The internal project team was stretched thin and the CSR deadline was looming. This is, this is a common scenario. Knowing this critical CSR deadline was threatened, the project team proactively brought in an external writing partner to assist with completion of the report. This is one of our case studies. At Criterion Edge, we're not always brought in at the beginning of the writing process. Sometimes we're brought in to help, support, or even rescue a writing project to try to drive it to completion on time. So this was something, this is a straight out of our playbook that we've worked on something like this before. But we were brought in to assist the other project team members to get this CSR across the finish line. So the strategy was that we, Criterion Edge, the external writing partner, was deployed to support certain sections of the CSR, freeing up other internal team members to focus on other key sections, conclusions, messaging, review of the document, the things that they know best and do very, very well, while our team put together the document from beginning to end and ensured that it was review ready. And the result was internal stakeholder reviews were conducted on schedule, which is always a relief. Updates were incorporated on time into the final document, and the CSR was successfully submitted per the project timelines. So using an external partner or even another internal writing partner that you brought maybe from another team doesn't always have to be, they're going to write the whole document from the beginning to end. It can be strategic, as in this case, where you're strategically utilizing them in some sections of the report that are the most demanding, that require maybe the most skill at putting together as writing partners. And that is a good way to utilize your budget, your resources, people's time, and still have a successful outcome. Next slide. So here we are with questions. Do we have any questions for either Sheila and I?
All righty. We do, in fact, have a couple, I believe. So we'll be transitioning to our Q&A portion of today's presentation. If anybody has additional questions, you can feel free to submit those using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. If we do not get to your question, we will follow up after this presentation via email, and we'll try to get you an answer then. That said, let's go ahead and kick off our first question. When is the best time to integrate a writing team? Project scoping or once the project has been more fleshed out?
Oh, Sheila, certainly weigh in. Weigh in. I'll start. Excuse me. That depends on what the questioner means by project scoping. To writers, often project scoping is marked by a kickoff meeting, and the scoping of the project because writing is about to commence. Because other aspects, key inputs into whatever the written deliverable is, are ready or nearly ready, and it's time to, fire the gun and get the project going. So I'm always in favor of that the writing team is a critical member of that scoping process and should be integrated sooner rather than later. However, it's not, to me, it's not required that a writer, a dedicated writer, is a part of the earlier work as the deliverables or the input documents that are going to be needed to create the deliverable are still being fleshed out and finalized. So it's just when you're ready to start writing, bring in your writer, have a scoping meeting. Sheila, any thoughts there?
Yes, I agree with you, Laurie, but I think that one of the things that our case study highlighted is that's not always possible. I think totally agree. The earlier, usually the better. That can get everyone on the same page. You can get background, but I think with some of the the writing teams that are brought in, we're used to working on tight timelines, and coming up to speed quickly. So sometimes it's an issue or a bottleneck or a huge problem has been identified. We have to bring you in late, and you need to go. And so I think it's, all depending on what's the need of the project and what's the need of the writing team. And if it's only writing a certain section, having them in months before is not going to do a whole lot. other than kind of, put everyone on the same page and have them up to speed. But I think that's a nice thing about a writing team. They offer flexibility. You can bring them in at any time, and I think you can also shut them off when they're not needed. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. It's, the question, it's the project, and it's what's feasible from the team.
Now that Sheila made a good point about the timing here, and the point that she just made, I just wanted to re-emphasize, is that writing teams, whether they're external or internal or a writer, can be called off, if there's a delay. It happens all the time. We're a writing company. We provide writing teams, or one writer or multiple writers or a team, to our clients. And sometimes there's a pause in our work because internally some document needs to be revved, or questions need to be answered, or data needs to be scrubbed again, and TLFs need to be rerun. And that pause is fine with us. It's better to shut us down, or we can turn our attention to another part of the written document while some problem is being solved. So that was a good point, Sheila.
Lovely. Let's go ahead and move on to our next question. What are some of the challenges in integrating an external writing team into a company?
So I can start with this one, Laurie, if you'd
Go
like,
ahead, Sheila.
and then I'll let you add in. Again, just kind of hitting on some of the things that we've talked about already. Understanding key roles and responsibilities. I would see this as one of the biggest challenges. So I think, if you're bringing in an external writing team, it needs to be very clear to the internal team as well as the external team, what are the roles, responsibilities, and that everyone understands who those key stakeholders are, what's the review process, and what is the target timeline. Because if everyone's, functioning in silos and not talking to each other, timelines, you could have two separate timelines, and someone's working on this one, waiting for reviews, and this other, the review team is 2 weeks behind. So I just think, establishing those roles and responsibilities, talking to each other, and the realistic timelines.
Yeah, Sheila, you've really emphasized the essential skill of teams that we can never take our eye off of, which is communication. And when communication starts failing, someone wasn't clear, someone forgot to send somebody else an email updating them on a change, or the change happened and then another change happened, and again, key people were not updated. So communication failures between teams, whether they're external or internal, between individuals, is always a challenge, and is probably challenge number one, is communication, proactive, anticipatory, and immediate when there's especially if an issue arises, would be what I would add to Sheila's comments there. Those are some of the challenges. There's other challenges that can arise. We don't often encounter this with our teams. There's sometimes style challenges or personality challenges. That doesn't often happen because people have their eyes so focused on the task at hand and if we're all on the same page, then I think that works usually out very well. Again, I want to reemphasize the importance of that upfront scoping and that communication upfront, asking questions, getting things clearly defined, written down, ideally, and agreed upon. Other things that could be very helpful to integration of an external team is putting together a messaging matrix. What are the the internal team knows the points they want to make and emphasize with the data and other pieces throughout any kind of a document. So a messaging matrix is extremely useful to writing teams. What is the language you want us to use over and over again whenever a particular topic comes up? To repeat that messaging if a writing team is uncertain about how to word that, then it can be inconsistently worded throughout a document, which a regulator will pick up on. So those are my thoughts. Any more, Justin? Any more questions?
I believe that is going to be it for today.
Oh, great. Okay.
Thank you all to those of you that were able to tune in. As a reminder, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar shortly after, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. If you have any additional questions, you can reach out to our team at consult@criterionedge.com. That'll be included in the chat. And we would love to get a meeting on the calendar to discuss more about either a current or upcoming project you may have. That said, our team will stay on for a few more minutes in case there are any last minute questions. If not, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.